Hi everyone, it's Mark Puncher from Employer Branding Australia. Welcome to the recording of our recent webinar on talent engagement strategies for health and human services. Why are you getting a pre-recorded section of this? Because I forgot to press record at the start of the webinar. So we've got most of it and that's coming up, but I wanted to make sure that you were able to access the initial information I provided and the introduction to our panelists. It was a great webinar, unbelievable insights, and I'll just give you a little flavor. We obviously acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we were on. For me, that was the Turrbal and Yagara people. I'm extremely grateful that I get to do the work that I love on their lands, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And of course, I acknowledged anybody who was joining the webinar who identified as First Nations. I introduced the panelists. They are amazing human beings. I hope you're going to find this in the recording, the insights they've shared, the perspectives. Shannon is a Chief People Officer, has been there and done it with many large organizations and smaller ones, including Icon Group in end-to-end cancer care. And then Endeavour Foundation. And now she's in an executive GM role, really on the operations side and strategic side, running a key part of Endeavour Foundation's business. We had Matt Quinn, who runs talent acquisition for Anglicare Victoria. What this guy doesn't know about TA isn't worth knowing. He's a great guy. He's extremely authentic and just loves employer branding and wider talent strategy. And Sarah Duong. Sarah, I hope I've said that correctly for the first time ever. I've known Sarah, like Shannon and Matt, for a number of years. She's a wonderful human being and seriously good at what she does. She now runs Head of People and Culture at Advara HeartCare. And all three have given such powerful insights and perspectives and ideas and recommendations in this webinar. So what we've covered in the webinar and what you'll hear the discussion cover is these three things: the current talent challenges in this space across attraction, retention, cultural engagement, and performance. We talk about the strategies that our panelists are seeing work and the observations that I have on what we're seeing working, including how to embed employer branding and how to get that started, whatever your size. And then we have a little bit of advice just flowing in from there on advice on making it happen. So I started really confirming your people are your impact. Anybody who knows me knows this is the message I start with always, but it's worth remembering, especially in healthcare and human services of all kinds, in all roles, in all locations, all types of organizations. The behaviors of the people on the ground and behind the scenes really matters most. We often say your people are your impact, your opportunity, your brand, your client experience, your community impact. They are your risk as well. And so it's not just, of course, about attracting great talent. We want to attract great talent, but it's also about ensuring that those people stay and perform and contribute to our culture. So done properly, employer branding as one tool can play a huge part in making that happen. So we talked about the opportunities you have. We also showed a picture of an oxpecker, excuse me, and a large mammal. I think it's the impala. The idea here was, I talked about the trends that we were seeing across the board around humans, people, employees, all with challenges that are all in personal recessions of some kind, groceries, cost of living, fuel, mortgage, home loan rates, rental, etc., has all gone up hugely. And at the same time, many employers and organizations are also struggling. So just when employees are seeking more money and more opportunity and more promotions and so on, and more stability and security and guarantees, many employers are struggling to provide those things. They themselves are asking, actually, they're asking their people for more from them, perform more, give me more productivity to help us survive or thrive. I made the point that in the healthcare and human services sectors, there are many organizations who are not shrinking, who are not at risk of going out of business, or ceasing to exist. The need is so strong, the demand is so strong in many of your spaces. But that doesn't mean it's not frantic and tricky and challenging. And I posed the question, who among you is seriously, consistently being asked to do a lot more with a lot less? And I believe that most organizations, most HR folks, most marketing and comms folks will say, yes, that's the case. And so my point was here, there's a real need to move away from parasitism, where you get the employee acting against the best interests of the employer to suit themselves, to make life work, the quiet quitting stuff and all that, or the quitting for a better job just because it suits them straight away. And an employer, these stories of employers who are just cutting people, whose treatment of people is really deteriorating because they're stressed, because they're just trying to survive. The point is, now we need to come together. It's mutualism, where we are saying we will support each other, we will thrive. In this case, going back to my animals, the oxpecker feeds from the impala and gets its food source there, but also keeps the impala parasite free. So this is about real mutualism in employment. And then I, of course, showed Cyndi Lauper, because no PowerPoint slide or Google slide is complete without Cyndi. The point I was making here was it's about true colors. This is the moment when there is challenge for people in their own lives, when people are struggling, when you've got the malaise still of post-COVID, when many people are afraid and many more are suffering in some way. Now is the time for really good organizations who have the right intentions, who really do want to win with their people and through their people, not at the expense of their people. Now you can show your true colors. And when you step up and show your story and tell your story, you will absolutely drive up your recruitment results, your retention results, and the performance and cultural engagement of the people who work for you. So leading into the panelists who you're about to hear, we talked about some observations in what is going on in this space. And I brought up 5. The first is that in this space, in many cases, especially on the front line, people have many, many options. There are many places to be a support worker. There are many places to work in aged care or disability. And it's really important to remember that at all times. And that's been the way for a long time. We must remember that so many people, especially those on the front line, especially those in, frankly, lower paid roles, often, they have a strong bond to the client or the resident or the patient or the community group or audience, and the personal impact they can have. You'll hear a lot about people saying, this is what I was born to do. It's a vocation for me. I don't really have a choice. This is what I need to do with my life and who I am. And that is amazing. It is brilliant. But I find that too many organizations are leaning on that too heavily. It's sort of, you make a difference, we care about you, yay, come and just work with us. It's not enough. I pose the challenge to any leadership team of any organization in human services, healthcare, community services, and say, why is it important that you exist? What if your organization ceased to exist? What would the impact be? And it's really important that as HR, comms, marketing, and wider leadership of an organization, you need to be able to consistently show talent, external talent who are considering joining you or who you want to, and your current team. Why? Why is it important that we exist? Why should you come and choose to make a difference with us? The third point was, despite all of this and this deep connection to the client, there's a tendency towards the transactional when it comes to the employment. So many people will say, I do this for my residents or my clients or the patients. And the relationship between them and the employer is often quite, can be shallow, can be very complex. Where do you as an organization, where does your brand sit within that relationship between the employee and the client or the community member or the patient? What often happens is a support worker will say, well, they pay a little bit more per hour, or they're going to give me more shifts, or they're closer to my home, so I'll go there. And that's okay. That's part of the talent offer if it suits them. And certainly if you can pay more money, fantastic. I'm pleased to hear it. But actually, we've got to ensure that we lift people and their mindsets and modes away from just the transactional, functional stuff. In your EVP, you've really got to be able to share, okay, impact, purpose, meaning, what does that actually look like here? Culture, supportive people, what does that look like here? How are you going to experience that, and how is that different? And in a similar way, growth and career opportunity, what does that mean in this organization, in this role, in this team, with this manager right now? there is across the board a yearning for support. Any sector that is hard to work in, and my goodness, you know, a lot of the work you do is so challenging and complex. Again, whether you're on the front line or behind the scenes, there is a yearning for support, but actually there's low expectation. There are many people who will say that they do not feel supported by their organization, by their manager. Some of that is about organizational support. Some of that is about individual support from your direct manager or from those around you. I think the biggest point I wanted to make was this last one. Trust is absolutely pivotal in any employer-employee relationship, but I think in your sectors, it's even more important and even more highly valued. There is a low bar, the employee who doesn't feel necessarily trusted and the employee who does not trust the employer. But there is also a sky-high ceiling. Almost every organization I've ever worked with in your sectors has the right intentions, wants to achieve in the right way, wants to grow and so that they can make an impact. And they want to engage and do that with their people. But there is quite a big difference between just having the right intention and being able to systematically deliver a culture that empowers and inspires and that engenders trust. And that is, you know, when you've got that right, that's when people will stay and perform. So I think there's a huge opportunity right now for people to show their true colors and build those cultures. And then I handed over to Shannon Foley at Endeavour Foundation and asked what she was seeing in the market. You miss around 8 seconds of what she said, but you'll soon get the gist. I hope you love the rest of the webinar. Do give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. And I hope to see you again in the future. Thank you.
Models, operating models, which some of the more traditional, bigger service providers can't compete with in terms of their agility. And we have multiple complexities around, you know, a highly casualised part-time workforce. SHADs and CISA awards are very difficult instruments to operate under. I can see Sarah having a giggle at that because that is very challenging. So that it feels like, you know, from an attraction retention perspective, there's a lot of things going on that require significant consideration and attention in order to put in place strategies for attraction and retention and performance that are meaningful and have the desired level of impact. Couple of things I would say, just in respect to, you know, those things particularly. So to use a Cyndi Lauper reference, I love that.
Love it.
You know, and I think I was looking at her on your screen thinking of her song "Money Changes Everything." But actually, in our sector, it's not necessarily the case. So I think people often think, you know, the biggest hygiene factor for retention and attraction is income and it's remuneration. And it absolutely certainly is important to get right. It is a hygiene factor. But you are 100% correct in saying people join for mission and they join for client. So they will accept a lot of other stuff if it means that they can to you know, work in a role that's really meaning for them in an area that is very important to them personally. The other thing I would say, so that's a challenge in the disability sector, particularly when we know that most people will be working multiple jobs. They will have not just one job with us. They might be working with other providers. They might also be working in aged care. They could possibly be working at Bunnings. So there is a real challenge for attraction and retention to think about who the talent market really is. How do you get them into the sector? How do you get them to see you know, a disability support worker role as a professional career option and not just a part-time or a casual job to fill in a gap or to earn some money? How do we help create access to formal qualifications and education in the sector, which hasn't necessarily been a hallmark of our industry before? You know, we look at what's happening in aged care in reforms around workforce, and I think there are similarities for us in the future around the disability support talent pool as well. Fatigue is another thing that we are very aware of from a retention perspective. Not only actual fatigue, just, you know, it's a hard and tough job, but change fatigue. There's a lot happening from a psychological injury perspective in terms of trauma-informed care that needs to be considered. it's a perfect storm at the moment of contributing factors. So from my point of view, an organisation like ours needs to be looking at all the elements of those influencing impacts and have a multi-factored approach to attraction and retention and performance, or else you're never quite going to get there ultimately.
Yeah, that and I mean, I'm dying to ask about 25 questions on that, but I mean, how do you protect yourself in that? I mean, it's all consuming, right?
Yeah, it's a big job, and I've come from the chief people officer role into an operational leadership position now, so I run the division. So I'm getting a very different kind of perspective because, I was a commentator perhaps before, an enabler, a suggester of concepts and strategies and ideas. I am now the owner of that in a practical sense, because I'm talking directly to my own people who I lead. And the commitment I feel I need to make to them about their experience of work lives with me. Like I am, I've got skin in the game with them to get this right. So I think what has been working for us and what we'll continue to work on is deep listening. We need to co-design our strategies. We need to hear from people and authentically reflect on what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and respond to that authentically. And transparently, and we need to ask people some tough questions about how we're leading. Are we doing the right things around spans of control, for example? Do you have enough contact with your leader to feel like you've got a positive relationship with them? How are we going, and where are we investing our budget, which is limited? And I know that everybody in the sector has strain on budgets and constraints. I don't want to be doing anything that isn't beneficial to ultimately providing, in that moment of choice when someone is thinking, today was a really tough day, I had really tough experiences with my clients, or, systems weren't working, or I had to do something that was purely manual again, and it was really annoying me. When they get to the end of that hard day and they're making a choice to stay or to go, I want that choice to be more than, well, I can't give up my job because I need to earn an income. I want that choice to be, what am I doing in partnership with my leadership team, and what are they authentically responding to, and will I stay another day because I know that the plans are legitimate and they're going to deliver to me authentically what I've asked for.
Wow,
So
that's massive. That's
the approach that I tend to take, and I hope that's working for my team. There's a couple of people on the line who who are working within my organisation today, so they'll tell me if that's not true, I'm sure.
Let's put it in the Q&A, folks. Let's make this public. Come on, that's amazing. Thank you. And again, it's that how do I as an individual make that difference? How do I engage others to do the same? Sarah, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Bring it back to, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing? You obviously had a fascinating time with Advara when you moved from being Genesis Care to Advara and so on. What are you seeing around talent attraction, retention, and engagement?
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark, because I think ours are a little bit different to Shannon's, being a private healthcare provider. So Advara HeartCare is the largest cardiology provider in Australia. And as I think most people know, heart disease continues to be the biggest killer of Aussies. Every day we lose many, many people to heart disease. So with that all said, you would think that our organisation would have an easy time trying to recruit people for our very great mission of improving the heart health of all Australians, but it's really tough. It's a crowded market. Everyone is making an impact. Everyone is doing things like ESG strategies really well. So for us, it's about, how do we tell our story differently? We are making an impact and we're doing it in a really unique way. So how do you make it real, and how do you make it authentic and standing out from the crowd? And we've got two streams of talent in our organisation, our doctors, so our cardiologists, and our sonographers. So they're the wonderful people that take the ultrasounds of your heart, usually after you've seen our wonderful cardiologists. They're really hard to recruit in Australia. There isn't enough of them. Supply isn't matching demand. So for us, that transactional recruitment that you talked about earlier, Mark, doesn't work in those streams. We can't just put an ad on Seek and hope for the best. We need to be really prepared and really proactive proactive in that space. And that's where we've been trying to work really hard on our employer branding strategy and our EVP to retain the awesome doctors and sonographers we do have, and also prepare to grow, because we do have a growth agenda.
I love that. One of the things I found really fascinating in doing yours was the fact that the cardiologists, the doctors, became a key part of the employee experience for the rest of the team. So how they behaved as the VIPs in that context and so on, a lot of the time, was massively important. So you've got this strange moment where in some ways they're the client, you're bringing them in, you're trying to ensure they get a great experience, they're the employee, but they're the often the leaders without the title or the position or responsibility.
Yeah, and really interestingly, it's the positive and the negative that we saw through that. So the feedback that we ran through discovery sessions, because we spoke to our people when we were crafting our employee value proposition, we had a unique opportunity, having divested, to basically reinvent the wheel, which I'm really privileged to have been able to do. You don't get that opportunity very often to start again, but we did get to do that. And what we were hearing is our doctors were, for a huge number of our staff, why they loved working for us. It wasn't actually about our executive team or our incredible CEO, who is very well known and very charismatic and wonderful. Go Dodd, as we call him, Dr. Dodd. But it was actually our local doctors that our team just admire and respect immensely. But we're also getting feedback that it was the same doctors who are also a constant source of frustration sometimes during the day when they run late or patients are waiting, and then suddenly it's our poor patient team members on the front desk who are copping the brunt of that. So it was really interesting to get that feedback and understand what our strengths and our potential gaps were.
And I love moving forward with that, how you turn that into an employee experience strategy that is focused on ownership, individual employee ownership. So we did some work with the doctors saying, do you realize how much impact you have when you walk in and ignore people? If you do that, if you're busy and you're stressed, if you are late for things, it has such an impact, not only on that person, how they feel in that moment, but how they feel about working here and about their role and their own self-worth. It was really deep, right? So you're not just people think employee engagement, employee experience is all about delivering for them, like, kind of like getting your kids an ice cream. It's not. It's engaging these audiences and empowering them and inspiring them to shape the culture, to be the culture, to be the employee experience that they're looking for. So super powerful. We'll come back to that, Sarah, as we go through. Last but definitely not least, Mr. Quinn, Anglicare Victoria, a completely different organisation. Again, tell us a bit about the organisation and the talent challenges you're seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So Anglicare Victoria are a huge organisation. Child, Youth and Family Services predominantly is the work that we do. We've got over 2,200 staff across 50 different locations, purely in Victoria. And I think with the variety and the breadth and the scale of the organisation has presented challenges for us in the past before with attraction and retention, purely because we're all focused on one mission, one set of values, I suppose you traditionally call it, but doing very, very different things on the ground day to day, in very different locations with very different teams and very different colleagues. So one of the challenges for us was understanding, when you look back at that whole traditional, and you played on it really well before, Mark, about saying that it's that having an impact and it's that for purpose work that traditionally you'd very easily lean back on as a not-for-profit child, youth and family organization. But in reality, these days, there's a lot of corporate organizations who have bigger resources, bigger budgets, and much more established ability to be able to really play and promote the sort of for-purpose work that they can do and what they can give back as an organization. So for us, one of the challenges was identifying what it is about us. And especially, I think the whole organization would know, and I mean, Paul Mack, our CEO, again, like you mentioned yourself, so charismatic, engaging, very well respected. He and 99.9% of the organization would say it's a great place to work, but one of the challenges we had is, well, why? Why? What is it? And that became even more challenging recently. We're not having the same challenges we used to have, from an attraction point of view. You go back to early pre-COVID days where it was attracting people. High cost of living, people wanted stability, people weren't looking to move, the candidate pool was significantly depleted. But I mean, I think from the beginning of 2024, we've seen a huge shift. People are more confident now about going after the work that they want. Their motivation has changed. Their priorities have changed. The things that they look for have changed. So I think that agility to promote your organization and share what matters to people in a inherently unagile industry and organization has been a challenge. So it's less about finding people, and it's understanding more about some of the data and some of the trends around retention. It's not finding people, it's finding the right people. And it's being understanding and accepting of the fact that not everyone who applies, regardless of how much they want to work in the industry, and no matter how much we would love to grow our workforce, it's understanding and accepting the fact that not everyone can do it, and it won't be right for everyone, and that's okay. Because ultimately, one of the biggest things for us is we don't just want to fill positions. We want the best outcomes for clients. We want the best outcomes for individuals, especially when you're recruiting at that lower level. You want to set the foundation right. We want to see a long tenure. We want to see less turnover within that 6 months. So our focus recently has been not necessarily just increasing our ability to attract people, it's sharing who we are, that perfectly imperfect nature of the work that we do. It is hard. There's significant risk of occupational violence and aggression. It's a tough job. Not everyone can do it. But what do we do as an organization to make sure that those who feel that they can, and those that we want to bring along on the journey with us, get the support that they need from us for them to be successful?
I love that, Matt. Thank you. And there's so much in there that I know that people on the webinar will be able to relate to. One of the key things I'd say there is that role of the leader. You can't pick your CEO, folks, but I mean, we've got amazing CEOs in these organizations. Paul Mack, Anglicare Victoria. I mean, I was thinking about it. What would I call him? He's a visionary, a street fighter, and the bloke in the pub all at once. And maybe you should put that on his LinkedIn profile. I met him. I remember I met him on a video called for the EVP, and you're just so inspired, but he's so real, and he's a battler, and he's going out. And my big question was, when we talked to the people of the organization, am I going to see that that's cascaded? Am I going to see that represented? And I did. And a key part of your employer brand and EVP is this agency. I think your EVP lead line is meet the moment, make it matter. And when you actually get in there and do it, it's not just come in and make a difference and it's all very worthy. It's not just the moment that matters. It's what are you going to do with that moment? What are you going to do with the moment where you've got the shopping on the lawn and the dementia resident or the alcoholic or the whatever, and you're having to deal with that situation? How are you going to use this opportunity through the lens of this organization with the mechanisms of this organization to truly make that difference? And it's so powerful. And Dodd, I mean, Advara, I don't know where to start. The first time I met him, they went around the table, the exec team, and they introduced themselves. And he's the CEO, and he said, I'm a cardiologist and the CEO. And it was very, very important that we heard it was his choice. And when we asked, why should you come and work here? Why is it important? The thing that he kept bringing it back to, because of the quality of what we do, and that saves lives and changes lives. And it wasn't just reeled off. That's what fuels him every day. And you find that energy, and it's infectious. So I'll remind you, I'll move into the next section. I would love anybody who wants to ask some questions. I think we've got a few coming in already, but let's talk a little bit more briefly on this one about talent strategies. I do want to make sure that you hear from each person, so I won't go on and on, but what's working, where should you focus, and link to that potentially around the employer branding piece. How is that actually making a difference? So some observations from us. EB is democratized. If you are a smaller organization, 50 people, 300 people, 400 people, especially if you're in a sphere where there are big players, you have the power. Your employee experience, people want to not be just a number. It's more likely in your organization. People want to have access to leaders. They want to grow and learn, and actually learn from doing, not just from sitting in a course. All of those things, you actually have the advantage. It's easier to change your organization than a large organization. Large organizations, there are huge opportunities and advantages as well. But I want you to hear this. You can all do employer branding, and you don't need a massive budget, and you don't need to work with a partner. Now, there are massive benefits to working with a partner, bias, but there are. I'll tell you what is really inspiring me right now. I wrote a job ad for a client the other day, and they've put this out, and within 6 days, they've had 350 applications with a high volume of high caliber applicants and the right applicants. You can literally just change a job ad, just improve a job ad, and don't just change it for the sake of it. Get that done properly. That's one area where if you can partner with someone, do it. But the thing linking to what Matt said, when you do that, even just one job ad, even without the recruitment marketing and the content and the strategy and the EVP, not only is that your opportunity to attract more quality applicants, but it's also your opportunity, A, to put others off, and B, to ensure that those candidates who could be great with you, that they come in with their eyes open. So a little tip for you, we'll write in our job ads, here are 3 reasons why we hope you'll love working for us in this job, and here are 3 reasons why we're afraid you might not. You know, Matt's point, this is hard. When you say to somebody on the front line in healthcare or human services, this is really hard, this is not easy, you're meeting them where they're at. It's the ones where you've got this corporate message that focuses all on the wonderful stuff, and you'll get, you know, get a discount and get this and get, you know, and make a real difference. They know that's not true. They know that it's not as simple as that. There's a bit of that, but actually, so telling the truth will really inspire them and encourage them to believe in you. It will also, again, ensure that someone joins you ready and inspired to actually deal with issues and solve problems, which is why we're paying them, right? So I think there's something really important in that. One size never fits all. I think that's pretty obvious, but you don't just get an EVP and buy an EVP. You don't just do some employer branding. You have to start with the issues you're trying to solve, and I'll come on to that shortly. EVP is immensely powerful if you do it properly. I reckon, I'm going to call it 80% of the EVPs I see out there, and I'm going to say not ours because I'm biased, but 80% of the EVPs I see not out there are slogans, just slogans with that are shallow, or they are basically Gartner or Mercer's reports on what matters to candidates just put on a website. And that is not an EVP. An EVP is a significant investment in money and time and focus. Don't do it unless you're going to do it properly. If you do, you will see huge benefits. But an EVP, you don't need an EVP. You can do this just doing some tactical storytelling through job ads, through a bit of content, through making your candidate communications better. You will absolutely move the dial. The bar is still quite low in Australia around some of this stuff in your sectors. So grab hold of whatever you can. You don't need to spend a fortune. And finally, processes and habits are the key to results. Our biggest challenge at Employer Branding Australia is we'll do work and it's great and everyone's excited and the board are excited and the executives. And then at times it can sort of fall away. So what we're always trying to crack with our clients is how do we operationalize this? How do we embed this in people's roles and in our strategy? We did some really strong work with Anglicare Victoria around how do we align this with the people and culture initiatives and strategies that are already going on and the comm stuff. And still it's a work in progress. You know, it takes time to get that right. So I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to jump in first. You know, what is working for you? What are you, whether it's something that is still a work in progress or something you've done that has got results, whether it's in employer branding or elsewhere?
Happy to jump in. For us, what's working well is just getting to know our employees better, for me, from where I sit. Mark's right, you don't necessarily need an EVP or a tagline. And an EVP isn't a tagline, it's not aspirational. It is the reality, it is the authentic, warts and all reality of your workforce. We did an exercise to articulate our EVP with Mark and the guys, which was one of the best things I've been a part of. Independently from that, we also did our scheduled employee engagement survey with our whole workforce, and both were so aligned. The output and the insights we got from our employees were so closely aligned, even though they were done completely independently and completely separately. It was really surprising. But what's worked really, really well is us having the opportunity to understand what employees want to say, what they want to say, what they want to share, what they can share, aligned to our EVP, our pillars of how people can make an impact, they can make their mark in this industry with us. They can make a move, they can move to different positions, they can progress in their careers. It's a career destination. We will make it work for them by providing some of the best support in this industry, in this state. But it's those stories and having access to it is really helping us balance, finding that balance between AI, automation, systems and processes that have to remain. We have to do more with less. We have to be able to keep things efficient, but we don't want to lose sight of that humanity, that personality, that authenticity. So having those stories, knowing the right questions to ask, being able to share just our employees' words and voices is brilliant, because in the long term, and it is a journey, it's going to help us share what is inherently us, while at the same time taking advantage of some of the AI efficiencies and automation that we've been able to do without going down that transactional route. So I think for us, that's one, for me, that's one of the most exciting things.
And you're right on the cusp of this, right? It's not yet fully released, it's not yet fully embedded, but it's, you know, it is so powerful. We always, when we're about to present back to the client and say, here's, you know, the EVP, the question isn't, is it good? It's, is it right? Is it right for them? And we're picturing the most disgruntled employees that we heard from or that we didn't hear from. We're picturing the people who are in, Dave, our COO, always talks about the employee working for one of your talent rivals, another organization. They're on the bus home, they're tired, they're fed up. Is it going to inspire them to consider a change? So I always think, is it right? And the alignment with your organization from Paul to everyone else is so bang on.
It's so natural. Day-to-day conversations, you end up thinking to yourself, well, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, that's kind of strangely aligned. And we've not, you know, it's natural. And I mean, the second someone like your guys, Mark, and you show you, the second you start to understand and the second you start to identify and realize, and everything just kind of clicks. I think the challenges are, like you say, is getting it BAU and getting it day to day and sharing the right things at the right time.
Fantastic, thank you. And for the person who asked it, we had a question about this, saying, what is the one tagline or line that you use that differentiates you? There's a great example with me at the moment, make it matter. You see that, and you could argue, yeah, of course, make a difference. That's a nice thing, anyone could use it. But it really speaks to like the meet the moment, make it matter. It's the action of the employee. It's the agency of this person and their opportunity to grab hold of and I guess take ownership of their own destiny, but also the legacy they leave behind. And then you break down in those three pillars, which actually allows you to say, this is why you should work for us, and here's what you get right now, and here's what we're working on. So I think that was a really strong example. Sarah or Shannon, do you want to jump in? Strategies that you're seeing are working or that you're working on right now?
I would add to that, just to echo Matt's sentiment around alignment. One of the key things for us is strategic alignment with the organisation's strategic plan and goals as well. So my part of the organisation looks after our employment services. So I actually have a team of people. There's about 2,300 people in my portfolio. Nearly 1,700 of those employees are people with disability who work directly within our work environments. And our strategy, our organisational strategy, is in alignment with client outcomes. So we talk about clients who are also our employees being included, empowered, leading a full and purposeful life, and can exercise choice and control. That should be the same for any other employee. Everybody wants that, right? So we've got an opportunity now. We're at the beginning of the journey for us at Endeavour to align those principles for our mainstream workforce with Mark and the team there. And that's going to be something I'll be really focused on, is what we say out to the external world matches the inside experience of us, because the disconnect of expectations is more damaging than anything else. And that would be my big call out, is you've got to think about the tagline and the promotion and the external articulation of your story. But if it isn't lining up with the story people are telling inside your business, you're never going to get across the opportunities that you could.
And Shannon, you've absolutely nailed that. And you've also started the answer to a question we've had. How do you attempt to address what has been a historically bad employer brand in the market, particularly when the honest description or where the organization is working on it? And I think the answer is as much as two things. The answer is as much as possible, own it in your messaging. We are working on it. But also, and even before that, before you say anything externally, engage with your people right now and say, where are you at? Here's where we're at. What are we trying to achieve? Do you want to come on the journey? Now, that's easier said than done. First of all, if your CEO and your C-suite and your board are not on board with that, I just don't think it can happen. But don't assume just because they're not on board today that you can't change their mind. For what it's worth, I see a huge shift in leadership teams very quickly if you put the right people and the right ideas in front of them. But very strongly, I want to be very clear. If you have been in a really difficult position, if you're renowned for not being a great place to work, or you've just, it's been announced that you've been doing things badly or whatever, something's gone wrong. Now is the time. First of all, do you want a PR campaign and spin doctors? Certainly don't contact us if that's what you want. But if you want to apologize, or if you want to acknowledge it and own it and say, right, we are now taking action, it's now or never, come with us. And if you genuinely want to take your people on that journey, not take them and drag them, but let them drive as well, then you build a strategy for what is this going to look like? So where are we actually heading? What are we trying to get to? What does that mean for our people? What is the opportunity for our people, whether you've been here 10 years or you haven't even yet joined, you're in our process, or we want you to be. And what does it mean from our people? What do we need from them to get there? What's it going to take to get there? At the end of the day, they're not slaves. They can choose where they want to work. And so it's really important that you give people agency. They're not our children. We don't need to be perfect, but we need to own that journey we're on. And when you can go out there and say, we and our team, this is what we're working on, you just take the pressure off yourselves as leaders, as HR, as an organization, of this kind of this need to constantly be seen as a great place to work, which is it's a myth.
And Mark, I think we had one of the learnings when we did our EVP, that sometimes being imperfect can be a strength. So we had this unique piece where we're a huge organisation. We're not a startup. We've been in business for many years. But we were changing the engines of our plane at 30,000 feet. So when we divested, new systems, new processes, new people, building a team. And so for our corporate services team, we knew that what they were coming into was going to be a really challenging 12 months. And if we went out there with everything is bright and shiny and wonderful here, our 6-month retention rates would have been, very, very low. They would have walked in and gone, this does not match what you sold me, I'm out. So we actually kind of had to lean into that. We are imperfect. We are building as we go. We need people who are okay with that and are actually really comfortable with that. And people saw the opportunity to make an individual impact in the corporate services space that they wouldn't have, obviously. We talk a lot about our patient purpose, but this was a way for our accountants and our P&C team and our IT team to actually make a real tangible impact. And we couldn't do that if we were a well-oiled machine.
And I remember, Shannon, when you were at Icon, part of your EVP, I mean, there was so many great reasons to work there, and we had a great EVP there. It was at Icon you can, and you had those pillars, purpose at pace, and all those things. But then halfway down the careers page, I don't know where the careers site's at now, it was many years ago, and neither of us are involved in that now. But halfway down the page, it said, we're not perfect. Here's what we're working on. And it was so strong, to see an organization being bold. And that comes with some self-assurance, saying we know there's a lot of good about us, but we're not perfect.
Absolutely. I remember at the time, Mark, you making a comment about, perfectly imperfect organizations.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me over the journey that we've been on. And I think that started in about 2018. And I haven't found a single organization that is perfectly perfect. So no one's expecting you to be perfectly perfect either. So it just comes across as disingenuous to suggest that you are. So I totally agree. Call it out and confront it in a responsible way and an authentic way. And I think Sarah's point is an absolute stellar one to make. Look for people who want to be part of that journey with you, because they're the ones that will stick around for the duration, and they're the ones that will create the experience for others.
It's so interesting. And you can, like, so everyone wants to make a difference. You can't make a difference if it's already done, right? And what we found is it's not a case of, is this someone who wants to make a difference or not? It's getting them into the mode of coming in and doing it. The classic one I always think of is people see an inspirational documentary about aged care, and so they all suddenly want to be aged carers. That's the worst situation, because what they need to see is we do quite a lot of work with in-home care with aged care or disability, and what they need to know is it's not sitting around, having a cup of tea with an elderly person every day. There was one story of somebody standing on the lawn. I referenced it briefly earlier, standing on the lawn with the shopping where the icy poles in the bag are melting, and the client who has dementia won't let them inside because they don't recognize them. And, it's the showering them, it's the arguing with them, it's all the stuff that makes up the day. That's actually, for the right person, that's the inspiration.
Absolutely. But I would also say, and Sarah and Matt might have comments as well, that when you partner with someone to expose that side of your organization and your in the experience you create, you need to partner with a team of people who you can trust with that information. Like, it gets very confronting, particularly when some of the shadow side of your experience isn't very palatable and you're in a care sector. So one of the things, and I know this is a bit of a shameless plug for Mark and the team at EBA, but it was really important for us to be able to work with someone who understood the importance of that trust, understood what we were trying to achieve, knew how important our mission was to us, both in the previous role that I was in cancer care, but also in disability, even probably even more important due to the number of vulnerable people we work with, and can be custodians of the care of that mission. So if there's, advice I would give about partnership, it is making sure that whoever is helping you figure this out is doing it in an aligned way as an extension of you and your team.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. The reason we partnered with EBA and Mark was based on our trust of them with the information that we were going to be sharing. We were really keen to understand warts and all. Yeah, we wanted to know the good, but we also wanted to know where we can improve. But yeah, when you work in an industry like this and you consider the nature of the relationships your employees have with clients, some of that can be quite confronting. And we wanted those who understood that and who would ask the right questions in that respectful way and who would take it on board, because you can't be in a position to ask those questions if you're not going to put yourself in a position to be able to address what you hear. So yeah, I'll just mirror exactly what you said there, Shannon.
Thank you. And thanks for the compliments. That's very validating. There's a third section of this, which is what tips would you offer? But I think it's going to feed quite nicely into this continued discussion, and we've got some questions as well. So, but I think that the partner very carefully is really important, and this actually isn't a plug for us or a pitch for us. The thing I say to any organization when they approach us, first thing I'll say, if they say we want an EVP or we want to do this, the first thing I say is why. So, and Dave Concannon, our COO, he's legendary for this statement: employer branding is a business solution to a business problem. So what are you trying to achieve? What problems are you trying to fix? What opportunities are you trying to seize? And it's not just, oh yeah, we want to recruit better. It can't be as simple as that, right? So, and when you understand those things, then you can start to say, well, what do we actually need to do? And do we need a partner, and how and where? So of course, look for partners with expertise, and I'm going to call it specialist understanding of talent and people and culture, not just brand, is important. Equally, not just an HR consultant. But beyond that, it's saying, what should we get you to do? What should Employer Branding Australia or any other partner do, and what should we do? Because we can't do it all. Even if we try, a classic example is strategy. We can't give you an employer branding strategy. You've got to build that. Our job is to help you get there. The biggest thing we can do is help you avoid pitfalls and get you there quicker, and really be the champion and advocacy. We'll be the ones frowning and saying, no, I know it sounds lovely when you say it like that, but it's not going to happen. This is why that's not going to work. And then we engage and find other ways. And it is a messy process. Question from Amy from Good Start. Amy, great to have you with us. How do you effectively communicate your retention strategies to frontline employees who have limited access to traditional communication channels such as email. So that's the idea, isn't it? In a corporate business, you send out the email. In my business, I send out an email and they read it. What are you doing? Is anybody finding that as a challenge or something that you're working on? How do you communicate via channels other than email?
Big one for us, Mark. I think, our guys are clinical, they're on the tools, they're with patients. So even team meetings can sometimes be really scarce. So I think we had a unique opportunity when we divested, that we did have an opportunity to reinvent some communication channels. And we had some champions that were local people at the business. They weren't leaders, they weren't managers, who had a vested interest in this. And we used all the streams like WhatsApp and Teams chat and all of those informal ways to, I guess, spread the news about what we were doing. And I think once you've got your EVP and your brand and your strategy down, and you get to that storytelling phase where you're actually profiling people in your business, real people that are known and loved and influence daily with their teams, people want to know those stories. They want to engage with that content. So I think finding those people in your business to profile and tell their stories and putting them on a spotlight, as opposed to having your CEO or your head of people and culture always doing that communicating, that's really effective, and it's been really effective for us.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on engage and not just retention, but engaging with those staff, inspiring them? The classic is storytelling, right? Sharing stories about what's happening if they're too busy or they're not on that channel.
One little thing we're quite excited about is we started a big project recently about recognition. Shannon, you said the SHADS award earlier, obviously puts us on a pretty level playing field when it comes to differentiation, but recognition beyond pay and benefits is huge for people who do work that is this hard. But the EVP process that we've been through, and our new EVP and our understanding of what matters to our employees, is giving us the opportunity to rethink recognition, to the point where we're kind of looking at building that up from the ground up. Informal recognition, formal recognition awards. We trialed something within our P&C team about, okay, well, we're not going to incentivize behavior that aligns to our EVP, but what we are going to do is when we hear those stories that really demonstrate it naturally, we're lifting those up. We're bringing them to the forefront. It's not a comms strategy as such, but it's something that we'll hope will flavor informal and formal recognition across the whole organization, which then just highlights those stories that talk so naturally to your EVP and what does differentiate you.
So good. Thank you. Any other comments on that? Or I've got another question here. How will you differentiate your organization as an employer of choice in an industry facing such widespread talent shortages? And again, I think I have a real challenge with the phrase employer of choice. No disrespect to the person who asked, but the reason is I think it takes us down a mindset of going, okay, what matters to employees? We offer those things. We're an employer of choice, or we've won an award. I disagree with that. I think it's about the connection that you have with your current team and with your past team as people who leave. How you exit people is massively important, and how then you're able to tell that story to share that connection. The bottom line is that the culture, that it's ironic, you're trying to build this culture to keep people with you, and that culture is what drives the performance, and the culture and the performance is the product for somebody who's considering joining you. Because what do I care about? Yes, what do I get? The money and the functional and so on, and what it will do for my career. But alongside that is, what's it going to be like to work there? And is this going to be somewhere where I can thrive? And so I think it is about really starting internally, engaging with people and ensuring that people are inspired. The question earlier about the work, we're on a journey, it's been awful, and we are working on it. That is your opportunity. That is your opportunity to get people mobilized and on board and say, how exciting to come and be part of this endeavor. Forgive the pun, Shannon. Any thoughts on that, folks? How are you differentiating, whether it's along the lines of the stuff I was talking about or something else?
It's a really challenging piece, particularly in human services. So what we're starting to do more of is, and it's the reason why our entire business strategy, which you can have a look at on our website, is client focused, is we really want people to understand that our point of difference is our authentic commitment to client outcomes, and whether that's an outcome through living in one of our supported living accommodation services, or in community access, or in employment, that the experience that people get from partnering with Endeavour for their disability supports is the best possible opportunity for them. Best possible is one of our taglines we use a lot, because it really is important to us. So I think that is helping us sort of ground a message around what makes us different, is that is an unwavering commitment to client, but that doesn't come at your expense. We don't want people burning themselves out for clients, because we know that you're no good to deliver a great client outcome if you aren't taking care of yourself. So I agree. I'm not a big fan of employer of choice language, but I have been playing around with this idea of employer of choice for you, and what does that mean in your world, and what's possible for you.
So good. Thank you. I'm conscious we're at time, folks. Thank you so much for those who've stuck with us. I'd love to just invite the panel. Anything else you want to share? Any specific final piece of advice if you're thinking about doing stuff, or if you're trying to battle these challenges?
Only piece for me is let your people tell your story. So all that amazing stuff that, you know, you're doing, Shannon, we've done as well, and found that words on a page on our website were great when that's all we could have budget for, but where we've seen a real increase is where we've been able to actually get a video crew to film our people and have them tell their own story. That's been hugely beneficial for us.
And you hit so many buttons with it, don't you? It's retention, it's attraction, it's overall organizational brand, it's all of it. Matt, any final thoughts from you?
I was going to say exactly the same thing that Sarah said. It's just ask your people. You cannot know what your culture is, and why people join you, and why people stay, and why people do the work, just without asking them. And ask everyone. Don't pick the ones you think are going to say the best things. Don't focus on trying to be the best. Just start by asking the questions to the people who are already with you. And be prepared for what you're going to hear as well, because it is impactful, very impactful. I think we had tears at 2 of our playback sessions.
Yes, we did. They were useful tears, and it was
they were.
tears.
It's because we enjoyed it so much. It wasn't because we thought it was rubbish. No, you did a great job. But yeah, just ask them. It's brilliant, really good what you hear.
And Shannon, thank you, Matt. Final thought from you.
Oh, look, I don't have anything further to add to Matt and Sarah, but I would just say if the people that are on the call today are here because they're thinking about the beginning of their journey, then they're already on the right track. You know, just the effort to put in your busy. I know everybody in the sector is hugely time constrained, so spending an hour to think about this as a concept is the first step towards a brilliant journey. So that's all I really wanted to say.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank all 3 of you so much. I want to thank the EBA team for putting this on. I really want to thank everyone who showed up and engaged with this. We'll be in touch with our prize winner. And I'll probably give away 2 prizes today because there were some great questions. We'll answer any questions we couldn't get to. The last thing I'd say is just be you. Just forget campaigns, forget the big gloss, forget corporate comms. Have the intention to elevate your people, to celebrate your people, to tell those stories. So yes, you can attract, but also drive pride and connection among your team, and be really comfortable with the work in progress, because that is the actual journey that employees should want to be a part of. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay in touch. Let us know if we can support you in any way, and see you all soon. Take care.